So in the honor of the passing of Stan Lee, and what I could best describe as my first ever Patreon-like request by my dad, I decided to revisit one of Marvel Universe's earlier films, Iron Man, and to see if it still holds up today. And if I'm honest, yeah, I think it does. Especially when you look at the more modern Marvel. Yes, I hate this movie, but that's not here or there, so let's focus on this movie. So in case you don't know, Iron Man's the story of one Tony Stark, millionaire playboy on top of the world in the field of military weapons, until one day, after a demonstration, he gets kidnapped by Taliban soldiers using the very weapons he built, and if that wasn't bad enough, he has a ticking time bomb on his chest that is only kept at bay by a car battery, and if that wasn't bad, is forced to make a new weapon for his captors. However, instead, he secretly builds a suit of armor, escapes, and devotes his life to ridding the world of weapons by becoming the Iron Man. So as what was going to be the first movie in a series, there was a lot that could have gone wrong, especially with Iron Man being a lesser known hero. Maybe you don't remember, but there was once a time when DC was king, and the most Marvel I had ever heard of was Spider-Man and the Hulk, which I wasn't necessarily in love with when DC had something like the animated Justice League series and Teen Titans, while Marvel had Emo Peter and whatever the hell this was. Funny how times have changed, but I now see Marvel as king while DC is still playing catch-up. Which, even if you're like my dad, who's insistent on Justice League and Batman vs Superman being the greatest superhero movies of all time, you can't deny that, even at its worst, and I do worry where the MCU is heading, especially if one of its greatest icons gone, Marvel has proven both successful in its profits and reception, a lot of which can be traced back to this very movie. So what still makes Iron Man good? Well, just looking into the first few minutes, with the scene of Tony in the Humvee with the soldiers, you're immediately able to get a feel onto who he is, a rich boy living the high life, and no one has to say it. It's all with how everyone around him reacts and how he reacts to them. And as cringy as something like that selfie scene was, it establishes both on Tony, as it shows a more pleasant side of him even back then, as well as to make these soldiers feel like real people that you do feel bad about when they die, as well as later with Tony and his cellmate when they bond. It's not like, and if I may, in Batman vs Superman, where most of, if not all the dialogue, was only used for exposition and to advance the plot, but as a real conversation people would actually have. Not that the exposition isn't present, but it's often told in more creative ways that don't feel forced. Not that I don't like a good story, but if I had to choose, I'd rather have a bland story told to death with characters I care about than a great story with weak characters on people I don't feel invested in. Speaking of it, back to Iron Man, what would become more evident as more movies came out and we had a lot of bland villains, I kinda actually like this movie's villain. Should I say spoiler? I'm sure you all have seen it by now. Anyways, part of the reason I still like him and even don't think all the villains are as bland as people make them out to be, are his reasons to hate Tony are well foreshadowed in the first couple of minutes. As while Tony's getting all the praise, he's simply in the background and almost just a footnote in Tony's life. He even has to suppress a moan while he does all the hard work of accepting the reward while Tony's off being a playboy. Which doesn't last long as we get to how Tony changes from this spoiled rich kid to a hero. One of my least favorite scenes from Batman vs Superman was the infamous Martha quote. Not so much the scene itself, or even the idea mind you. Their mothers have the same name and it shows Bruce Clark is human. Not a bad idea or setup. As a start. Now, I wouldn't have had a problem with Bruce agreeing to help save Clark's mom if at first that's all it was. Them putting aside their conflicts the whole movie built up to, with them still not trusting each other, but willing to work together towards the greater good and slowly getting to know more each other along the way. Instead, this is what is supposed to make them completely stop hating each other and be all buddy-buddy, while ignoring everything the film was supposedly building up towards. Now why am I bringing this up apart from saying how good it is to let it out? Well, back to Iron Man and looking back, it would have been so easy if this was all it took to make Tony want to be a better man seeing Jensen die. Now, it's a good starting point, and even though he's a better person when he gets home, he's also still a lot like the same rich kid he was before. Far more shown in other movies, but that's not the end right when it should only be the beginning, without making what happened feel unimportant. Oh, and did you know you can make your movie funny without taking away from the more dramatic moments? Yeah, if one thing is going to kill Marvel and give DC another chance to be on top, it's its comedy. Well, if their movies are more like Batman vs Superman Ultimate Edition instead of the theatrical cut, or like Wonder Woman. You know why I hate Thor Ragnarok and am baffled by all its positive reception? It's because it can't seem to go 5 minutes without a joke. And I mean that generously. It couldn't even let us feel emotional when Odin and bloody Asgard died. Seriously! This is supposed to be the most highly emotional moment, and they end it off with a bloody joke that just kills the mood.
Become a haven for all peoples and aliens of the universe. Yeah, those foundations are gone. Sorry.
Anyways, which is just saying when you consider Marvel's recent success was actually built on people saying superhero movies were either too serious or too goofy, and that finding a perfect compromise wasn't possible. Well, this movie sure showed them wrong. I mean, take one of my favorite scenes right after Yinsen's death, which could have been way too depressing or have a cheesy pun while the villains got comedically defeated. Instead, we get both one of the funniest and hard-code moments, period. It's just so hilarious after everyone failed to kill him, while not taking away from the way their action, and now analyzing this scene also shows more of Tony's character while they're at it. A lot of funny moments are like this, and even when they're not, they're at least not in the middle of a dramatic moment, or a funny moment will be followed by an emotional bit. From here we get Tony back to the stage with a new lease on life. At the middle of this movie is the building of the suit, which I love, but couldn't really say more to why I love it without repeating myself. Good character moments, funny and dramatic moments perfectly balanced, the build up with his villain, the fight which I thought had a clever solution to defeat Jebediah, if it didn't feel like it needed a longer climax, but then we got to the ending. Now the thing to remember was, before this, the norm with superheroes were that they were supposed to have secret identities. People are not supposed to know who you are no matter what. So imagine my teenage self when I saw this.
Truth is, I am Iron Man.
It's not a big deal now, and I've heard this was already actually the norm in Marvel comic books, but it was certainly a big deal back then. I was already thinking this movie was great and couldn't get any better, and then this moment just breaking the mold blew my young mind. He's like, why do I need to hide my identity? Sure, there are a lot of cons to this, and I'm actually glad they addressed quite a bit of them in the sequels, but it was a bold move that I have to greatly admire. This was going in a completely different direction, and I really wanted to see more. And while you could argue that maybe some other superhero movies might have led to the rise of the more cinematic universes we see nowadays, this movie definitely was the great starting point for what would become one of the most profitable and successful, and hopefully still will be, franchises in human history. And it certainly made you want to see where they would go with this, and go with it, they did.
We are strong, forever fight as one. Assemble, we are strong, forever fight as one. Always we will fight as one. Avengers assemble, with evil on the run. Avengers assemble, assemble, we are strong, forever fight as one. Assemble, we are strong, forever fight as one.